little look at the representation of oversharing in media.
I wish that I could bake a cake made out of rainbows and smiles and we'd all eat it, be happy.
She doesn't even go here.
I have a form of rosacea that's from other people's breath.
Hey, didn't I hear you got married?
Yes. Caroline and I were actually the first gay couple in the state of New York to get divorced. Love doesn't always win. Guess what?
Hey,
How's it going?
it's going great. It's going great. I'm on the mend. You know, I just got some pins in my legs, believe it or not.
A fat, unconventionally attractive, weird woman who is typically lonely, definitely a social outcast, and absolutely someone that just gets shunned. They're typically there to be laughed at, not with. We're all meant to recognize people in our lives that we're like, oh, that's just like so-and-so. They just make everybody so uncomfortable. I think I'm actually just going to start asking people to watch until the end until you can comment, because otherwise you're missing all of the wonderful context. I'll even include a cute little surprise for you if you stick around until the end. Oversharing does indeed have a technical definition: the disclosure of an inappropriate amount of detail about one's personal life. And in the past, this was called TMI, too much information. Fellow millennials will understand. It was a term coined in 1988 by Joseph Chekler, but it caught on in the late 90s to a much broader audience. It's an expression indicating that someone has revealed information that is too personal and made the listener or reader uncomfortable. This concept has evolved into oversharing these days, which is a much broader concept and conveys anything that's personal. But what exactly is personal? And this is also applicable online and IRL. However, oversharing is something which has happened for many generations. I'd say going as far back as people could even communicate. But it often got labelled as gossip, people airing their dirty laundry in public. You should keep certain matters private, otherwise you'll bring shame on the family. And it was heavily about people being too emotional, because typically if you're oversharing, you're sharing your emotions about something, which I don't know if you forgot this, lovelies, but we live in a patriarchal world, and we always have in the Western world, so patriarchal values rule, and emotions, we don't have space for any of those except for anger. And don't forget, anger isn't actually an emotion. So I asked you how you define oversharing, because everything was so broad online and your responses were also incredibly broad too. One thing I really noticed was there were no specific examples or clear, easy to follow definitions given. If you overshare without being asked to, people will feel like you're oversharing. Again, what is oversharing? I was genuinely really wanting to get down to the bottom of this. Now, a strong feeling of uncomfortableness was referenced through a lot of your responses, whether you have felt like you've overshared yourself or had other people overshare to you. As always, context is key. I think it's only oversharing when one or more participants are unwilling or unprepared, whether it's trauma dumping on your bartender, posting intimate details about family or friends online, or simply misreading social cues. It all depends. And the term appropriate came up so often as well. But again, what exactly does appropriate mean? Because it means different things to every single different person. Like in some regions and areas of the world, talking about anything other than the weather and traffic was considered to be inappropriate. Whereas to other people, you can talk about like real lived situations and that's appropriate. I think most of us can really agree that if you're talking to a stranger out in public, you don't really want to hear about their recent bowel movement or their latest sexcapades. I think that we can all agree that is overstepping certain boundaries, and I wouldn't go recommending you'd go talking to your, next cashier about any of those situations. But what about the very broad gap between the weather and bowel movements? That is a really big gap we're on about here. Since oversharing is so nuanced, what some may consider to be oversharing, others may consider to be, quote, normal. And I do stress this all the time. We all have different lived experiences, so everybody's normal is relative to themselves. This is neither a good or a bad thing, it's just a thing. And I don't even like the term normal to begin with, okay? I've got a lot of problems with it. Someone talking about their childhood when asked about it, they may just see this as being a normal conversation, but the listener may see this as actually being oversharing and trauma dumping. But how does this person know that what they've experienced isn't normal unless people actually talk about their experiences? Personally, I think that most neurotypical people can fall into 4 different categories when it comes to oversharing, ranging from Carrie, who is very comfortable with talking about anything, but she may seem to be clumsy and really undignified, to a self-assured and non-judgmental Samantha, who speaks freely about their life and calls out BS when they see it, to a fear-based and dignity-focused Charlotte, where it would horrify them if people knew about their inner lives and they don't feel comfortable with emotional matters, so they don't know how to handle when people overshare. All the way to Miranda, who looks down on people who overshare and potentially even calls them attention seekers. Holding a well you asked for attitude of people taking advantage of them or are mean to them, a Miranda approach is mostly based on a feeling of never wanting to be vulnerable themselves. Perhaps they've been hurt in the past, they judge others who do that. Mirandas are not trying to be mean for the most part. None of these characters are perfect, and plus, I mean, how relatable really are they if they're just like a bunch of rich white women living in New York in the 90s? But I think that we can really identify with whose characters' attitudes to oversharing we can identify with. Do you not know these ladies? Have you not watched Sex in the City? Let me introduce you. What do you mean I can't watch a show Netflix? I can watch the 2 movies which come after the show, but not the show itself? It's a good thing I've got today's sponsor, NordVPN, so I could just hop on over to the USA and watch the show there. Then when you're done watching the show, you can use NordVPN to come over here to Aotearoa to watch the 2 movies because the USA don't have them. Or if you'd rather see a different group of friends, we actually have the TV show Friends here on Netflix, but the USA doesn't. But how does this work? I'll share the secret with you. NordVPN is a virtual private network with servers positioned all around the world. So you could pretend to be anywhere else by connecting to one of their many servers positioned globally. It's not only handy for catching up on shows and movies that you can't watch in your own country, but it's great for your privacy too. I know how much you value your privacy from my comment sections, and NordVPN has a threat protection feature which keeps you safe from harmful malware like Trojans, viruses and worms, which seek out your data to either share with others who use your personal and private information for nefarious reasons, or even destroy it, which is especially disastrous if you keep everything on your personal computer without backups. Protect your privacy and stop others from knowing where you are with NordVPN by going to my link, nordvpn.com/Bryony, which is also in the pinned comment down below and in the description box, and you can get an exclusive deal and 4 bonus months on a 2-year plan, and it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring one of my videos.
What brand would you smoke if your husband turned out to be gay?
Newports.
For the last 20 years.
Lucky's.
I'll take those. Saul never let me smoke. Imagine him judging what I put into I'm telling you, and the whole time, you know.
Oh, that's a bit personal. Now, before we get into unpacking all of the categories and as to why people have these attitudes towards oversharing, I really wanted to address the whole personal situation in the room. And I will use a personal anecdote for this. So I've been going to the same hairdresser for 6 years, but I had to tell her about my long COVID and the fact that it's been making my hair fall out. So I was like, please, you really do need to go gentle with my hair, otherwise heaps of it will come out. And also I needed to explain to her, like, I have to go slow between stations because my vision goes, and I don't want people getting angry with me for being too slow, okay? And also, like, the face that a hairdresser makes when they're brushing your hair and then like heaps of hair comes out, that face is not something that I want people to like worry about or feel. So I'm just like, I'd just rather give them a heads up, you know. I know it's a medical issue, which is my medical issue, but it definitely does affect the service that they give. But is this oversharing? And the reason that I bring this up is the topic of oversharing comes up all the time when it comes to service workers, retail workers, you know, frontline facing people. Now, when I worked in retail for 5 years, studying part-time in high school at a fabric shop, all the way up to full-time in fast fashion stores, I've had people tell me their most intimate detail. You have to cover people's events going from a date night to a holiday that they're really excited about, all the way to a tragedy of dealing with a funeral. I've talked to people about their deep issues and insecurities ever since I entered the job force, and I talked about that in this video here, right? I would take my styling books with me to help people figure out like their colors, their shapes that they should be wearing and everything. My goal was to help them feel happy in themselves and feel like worthy. So as you can see from this example, for me, I don't really count much as being oversharing because I've heard about people's trials, tribulations, successes ever since I entered into the job force. Now, does this mean that it's okay to go telling the cashier or the bartender like all of like your deepest, darkest thoughts and stuff? I don't really think it's okay to expect that sort of level of emotional labour, especially from minimum wage workers who are not qualified to actually give you any advice. But the reason that I bring this up is that I do understand why people do this, because you effectively have a complete stranger that can hear about your woes in the world. It's not going to hurt your family or friends or anything like that because we don't know each other. I don't know your circle or anything. So there's literally like no harm, no foul in a way. So I do understand how it happens. I'm not defending it. I'm just saying that I understand it. Difference. And you can look to all of the advice pages which exist on Reddit with all of people's anonymous accounts where they literally pour their heart and soul out to random strangers on the internet for advice. I mean, heck, I encourage it on this channel as well whenever I get you to fill out those surveys. The videos on a topic are very personal topics, right? And so people need to divulge their personal information, but it's still very anonymous because I don't know any of you in real life, right?
Filling their lives with an endless parade of decoys and distractions to avoid the painful fact that they're completely alone.
How is that helping? This piece of trash has nothing, I repeat, nothing to do with us.
Exactly.
One response which really stood out to me was, oversharing is revealing personal information to the point where it makes you vulnerable to exploitation. Now, this is a huge fear that so many of us have, right? There's a vulnerability. Your underbelly is revealed. And are you going to get tummy tickles? Or are you going to get attacked? You don't know. Same as when you're petting a cat, really. Except the cat's the one doing the attacking. This fear that we hold on to of this rejection, this bullying, this vilification in a way is very real. If you're vulnerable, you've shown your hand and you are now weak.
Pathetic.
It is so much more beneficial to be cynical and ironic in this world because you are never showing your true self, so no one can ever truly hurt you because they never really knew you. And some people do this because they've been hurt in the past, so you just completely shut off. So you undershare out of fear, which is completely understandable, especially if you've been bullied or gone through something traumatic, which we will be getting to in a later section. You know this cringe that we feel when we see someone that's doing something that is deemed to be socially inappropriate? We dread others seeing in this way due to risk of ostracization. This is where cringe heavily comes into play, and you know, the popularity of all of those cringe compilations and people filming people without their consent to mock them online and just basically bullying people online has really become a huge thing when it comes to cringe. This is where the Miranda attitude towards oversharing can have a bit of a dark turn to it, because this can turn into troll accounts, this can turn into online bullying, or just bullying people in real life, like sneering at them and making constant jibes and remarks. And I definitely count all of the trolls that make anonymous comments on my videos in this dark version of Miranda category. It's so brave of people to have an anonymous account and then hate on me. It really is. My main issue when it comes to this kind of thing is the bullying which happens and the bandwagoning which has been so normalized to just dogpile on people. Like, for example, I watch a lot of like millennial content because that's me on Instagram. There are Gen Z folk who are discovering different ways of playing around with fashion, and I saw this video of this girl that was really excited because she layered 2 tank tops on top of each other, and she was like, I've discovered a layering look. And then the amount of adult millennials that were just shaming them, and it's like every single generation has played around with fashion in different ways. Nothing is ever that original, okay? Seriously, it bothers me so much when people are just expressing themselves, being their authentic selves, and then people are like hating on them. I'm like, they're literally not hurting anybody. Danny Gonzalez recently had a video where he was talking about this guy that was called like the final boss of LinkedIn or something. But the videos that this young guy was actually making was just trying to motivate himself, motivate others to make sure that they can get through every day. And he was sharing his like real issues in the world and trying to make sure that he keeps a happy composure, and he's like, we'll get through it, it's fine. And I found this stuff to be really wholesome, and like I find this actually incredibly admirable because it's really hard to actually put yourself out there and be that vulnerable, and yet people are really hating on them in their comment section. I'm like, why? Is being earnest a crime these days? Because it's ridiculous, the response that people get. There is a difference between valid critique, like when pickup artists are saying you don't need to accept when a woman says no, because that is dangerous. That absolutely needs to be corrected, because if people start internalizing that messaging, that leads to very dangerous things, okay? But when people are literally not hurting anybody, I'm like, can we just let people be happy? For goodness sake, there is enough legitimate bad stuff in the world to not go hating on people for just being themselves. Celebrities aren't even safe from this either. Think about when Halle Berry won her Oscar. The significance of this wasn't lost on her at the time, and yet people hated her for this earnestness and this reaction. How dare you cry authentic tears? But the thing is, we haven't actually had a black actress win lead actress since then, in 2001. You can look to Anne Hathaway when she was in absolute tears and having an authentic emotional reaction to getting an award, and then people called her insincere. And it's like, just because you have forced your emotions so far down that you can't feel them anymore doesn't mean that other people can't feel their emotions. And would you look at that, the examples I just gave are both women, and emotions are a feminine thing to do, Again, we live under patriarchy and emotions are not okay. They're what make you weak. Anything associated with being feminine is weakness. And this is the real dark underbelly to dark Miranda, is internalized misogyny, or when men more relate to this, just straight up misogyny. And this is something where I would just caution to watch out for, because it's not really a fun thing to, promote.
I don't want to be the up-the-butt girl because, men don't marry the up-the-butt girl. Who ever heard of Mrs. Up-the-Butt? No.
What about if you're just uncomfortable with things? Welcome to being Charlotte, where you understand that there are appropriate things to show and tell and inappropriate things, and the boundaries are very clear and everything is very curated. It's about making sure that your reputation, which you've spent your life building up, is never going to be torn asunder, because reputations are ruined in, one night, a minute, a click? Can't have that. Now, one of you raised this could actually be a generational thing. I think oversharing is simply divulging information that we are culturally conditioned to feel ashamed of. For example, 50 years ago, almost everyone would feel overshared to if someone told them that they were gay. But now, for most of us, it's normalized and not a big deal. Like, do you remember the whole, I don't care what they do as long as they do it in the privacy of their own home, excuse that homophobic people used to give? It's given that energy. It's the same thing with people talking about politics more openly these days, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. Everything is political. So because people are talking about these things more openly, it's ruffling more and more feathers of this sort of sensibility. For example, it could be seen as oversharing to talk about this sort of stuff at the dinner table. That's impolite. It's just unclassy, TMI, nobody wants to know. The Charlotte approach is about maintaining status quo and not wanting anyone to pry into their lives and judge them, whilst they're actually also judging people who share, even if they don't say it out loud publicly. I see this in the way where we've become so detached from each other that anything other than surface level is like alien to us. Like, we don't know how to handle negative emotions, especially when other people are dealing with them, because we haven't been taught how to deal with that. Like, how many of you really know how to handle when an adult cries? It's just like, ooh, what's happening? Because we've been taught that everything needs to be kept very close inside, and this is a very white Western view. I can speak to the UK and here in Aotearoa, but from what I've gathered, it's similar in the USA as well. This is me basing stuff on observations, but even when someone passes, it has to be a very somber affair. You can have a few quiet tears, but there's nothing really, no one's really guttural, no one's really like making other people feel uncomfortable. It's very stiff upper lip for the most part, So that means that when people show genuine reactions, genuine feelings to stuff and have a very human emotion, we don't know how to handle it. We just freeze up and it's just uncomfortable. You can feel burdened because you're like, I should do something, and then you don't know what to do, and so you're stuck sort of spinning in like this wheel of awkwardness because we don't know what to do. And the thing is that people often actually, instead of a solution, they more often than not just want to be heard and understood and validated, really. If you're more of a Charlotte type when it comes to oversharing, I'm pretty sure that you're probably going to fall into the undersharing category, more having a curated look to things. And you could actually be one of the people who have multiple like anonymous accounts for things, so then you can like live your life more openly but privately. If that works for you, then that's great. It's just I cannot actually have the capacity for that because I just can't. The real issue is, what's the solution to people actually feeling this sort of level of frozen and uncomfortableness? The real solution comes down to family members actually teaching kids how to have these sort of like confronting situations and how to actually handle them. Like seeing the real emotions, seeing real grief, seeing real hurt, having these like honest conversations with a number of people. I also blame workplaces and schools for this as well, because the whole it's okay not to be okay corporate slogan rubbish and everything. I'm definitely calling it that, because it's okay not to be okay on your own time and with your own people, but not at work. Your productivity cannot be affected. Your schoolwork can't be affected. All of this stuff. No, we do not have space for this. If you need a sick day, you can take a sick day, but then other people are going to have to pick up the slack from the work that you're leaving behind. And also go talk to a therapist that you have to pay for, because no one cares about your problems. So I really do blame a lot of systems that are in place as well that kind of maintain the facade everywhere. But the thing is that not everything is a huge trauma that actually requires professional help. People actually just want to chat about stuff, but this distance that has been created, I personally don't think it's a good thing. It's like creating this whole wall. On the whole other end of the spectrum, let's talk about the shoe collector herself, the Carrie.
Is this you?
And there it was. My question mark staring me right in the face. Was that me?
Their cup runneth over with thoughts and feelings, and they just want to talk about it with people. They want to talk to other people. They want to pull them out of their own little shells as well and have everyone talk about issues, and they really want people's opinions on stuff. This is how they figure life out. I put most people who have YouTube channels or social media channels as being Carries, okay? And I'm even lumping myself in there as well. And I didn't even like her character in Sex and the City as well, okay? Miranda was actually one of my favourites, but Samantha is definitely my ultimate favourite. These are the people who are having conversations and unpicking things, sharing their personal thoughts on stuff. They include themselves in there as well and take on a lot of feedback and input. If you're not a social media darling, you can absolutely be a Carrie, but you're just doing all of that stuff in real life. But look at the flip side to this. You know, the whole, you're so brave for sharing your story. Oh, thank you so much for being so vulnerable. I didn't know that this was actually a thing until you talked about it, and now I feel like more safe in myself. How many times have people said that sort of stuff to me? I've actually lost count, genuinely, because this is the other side to the Carrie, which is having the taboo conversations. People have done this throughout history when they've been talking about things through their books, through interviews, and they've been way more vulnerable and actually shared their truth. And yes, this can sometimes be traumatic or really negative and really bad on stuff, or it can actually be really empowering. Like, there are so many different versions of everyone's different experience in life, and that's where I see a lot of positivity come from this, because it also helps us as humans all understand, like, is this okay? Is this not okay? Oh, this stuff that I've been through is actually really screwed up. I'm really glad that I've actually seen that through this now. And then you can take steps and get help, especially for minorities. Like, if you're of any kind of minority group, if you're LGBTQIA+, I think this stuff is like so important. So personally, I really don't like the derision towards oversharing. But there's a dark side to Carrie, as there is for every character here. But when it comes to Carrie, they can really take on other people's opinions way too much. And also they could potentially take more than they give, which is not really a relationship. Relationships are, you know, a bit more reciprocal. Go watch Mickey Atkins if you haven't yet, because their work is amazing. And because they're okay with being so vulnerable and honest, maybe this honesty is actually hurting the people that they love the most, because they're being so open with their lives, which is actually not something that they actually want. But you can be open with your own stuff, just not their stuff. It's one of the reasons I'll never talk about a whole bunch of stuff that I've dealt with. The darkest version of Carrie is the one that actually uses the stuff that's happened to them as a manipulation tactic, right? So then they don't actually have to be held to account or apologize for things. And we've definitely seen this with white women's tears, right? That's absolutely been a thing, still is a thing. Why am I saying it's been a thing? It's definitely still around. It's definitely still an issue.
Don't you want to judge me just a little bit?
Not my style.
The "this is me" approach. Hello, cool cat Samanthas. I so wish that I was you. To a Samantha, hate comments and gossip are just water off a duck's back, and sometimes they may even bite back. In the Samantha category of content creators, I think of Alexandra Arnell, Khadijah, and Natalie Wynn from ContraPoints. I would count all of them very much falling into the Samantha category, and I'm not envious of them, just admiring them. The Samanthas don't really care too much if you like them or not. They're like, this is how it is. They share their truth and they try not to judge others and try to come from a point of education instead. Though to judge is human after all, but it's more about like making sure that boundaries are in place and that people aren't just misinterpreting and twisting their words. They've seen a lot, they've done a lot, they've known a lot of people, and the only people that they need to prove something to is themselves. Now, do I know any of these creators personally? No. This is just how I view them to be based on watching a lot of their work. And yes, you can absolutely be a Samantha without having a social media presence. It's just that you're doing this stuff in real life. Like, you're talking about your life, you're talking about your opinions with people. You don't really care if people judge you. You're not really judging other people as well. You're calling people out on their BS, and you're just absolutely living your life and letting other people live theirs as well.
What's going on?
She stole my baby name.
You bitch. Let's go.
As you can tell, if you're a Samantha, you're basically the best kind of person, and go off, celebrate if you feel like you relate to this way more strongly than the others. Let's talk about the downsides of being a good listener. Now, to be my broken record self, I always say that all of us have different lived experiences, everything is all relative to what each of us have experienced, and everyone's fighting their own battles, and I really do always stress to make sure that people understand that, so then hopefully people can be a bit more empathetic and compassionate to people. But hey, I have an internet job, so expecting that maybe a bit too much. One thing which came up very often was people feeling burdened if people overshare to them, or if they're the person that people tend to come to. And like I said, this is definitely a role that I've filled in and still do, absolutely, in life. So I fully understand this, but the main thing that people really want is actually to just have someone listen to them and to feel validated. Now, validation gets a lot of stick. Like, people are always like, oh, why are you looking to other people for validation?
And you're all like, oh, define me, love me, I need love.
I hate that guy.
Because that's what humans need. Humans need community, and it's actually not a bad thing to want validation from other humans because we're social creatures. If you're a bit of a pushover or a bit too forgiving of a person, this is where you could potentially fall prey to people using this to manipulate you because you're too understanding, and then people can actually be mean to you, and I've been in that position before. That's why I'm saying this. And again, this is kind of why I like to stress the importance of boundaries, but not in the therapy speak way. I think that everybody knows how much I hate therapy speak and the HRification of relationship. Again, a big issue is that mental health support is not accessible to most people, and also social networks have kind of been crumbling for many years at this point. So that is something that we'll be talking about in a later section. Don't worry about that. But I really want to stress for you, if you're someone that feels burdened by everything, I just want you to hear this sentence that I wrote, and I don't want to get it wrong. You alone cannot fix the world, but you can definitely help make people's lives better. But someone else's entire life and well-being is not just on you to fix. Everyone needs a village, and everyone needs to work and support each other in that village. We all have various skill sets to be able to do that. So it's not just all on your shoulders.
Ross, how many parents have you lost?
None.
Okay, then you don't know what it feels like when one of them comes back, do you?
We've really got to talk about how this labeling hurts people with PTSD, CPTSD, traumatic events have happened to them in their past, and neurodivergence. I'm neurodivergent, diagnosed ADHD, undiagnosed, suspected ASD, and I find oversharing to be drastically easier than small talk. However, this typically leads to me using trauma dumping oversharing as a method to try and get closer to someone. I really struggle with the transition between acquaintance and friend, and I'm clueless on how to turn a casual friendship into a close one. Now, this sort of response and feeling was very common when I was actually having a rifle through subreddits as well. Another thing which got brought up a lot in comments was about people not being able to read the room, and if you're neurodivergent, I think that you are very well aware of this being said at some point in your life. The thing is that reading a room is not something which comes very easily to everybody, and it is absolutely a skill which people have to learn and actively work on and actively do to make sure that they're fully aware of stuff. And if you're neurodivergent, this is going to be a lot harder for you, and this is where people need to have like parental figures when their kids actually train them on things to do to make sure they've actually got these sort of capabilities. If you haven't been taught those skill sets from childhood, it can be incredibly hard to grasp. Like, they are definitely skill sets that people can indeed learn, but it is something that you have to kind of be actively doing. Trauma dumping also came up very often in your responses, and I really want to get a clear definition going before we go any further. It's unsolicited, one-sided sharing of a traumatic or intensely negative experiences or emotions in an inappropriate setting or with people who are unprepared for the interaction. Trauma dumping isn't the same as educating others or raising awareness of the effects of trauma, seeking support from loved ones, sharing the space of intimacy and vulnerability. This makes me think of the character Phoebe Buffay from the 90s show Friends. Phoebe had an incredibly traumatic past, and she was always painted as the weird one. Like, when it comes to what characters people wanted to emulate, it was always going to be Rachel or Monica. It was never going to be Phoebe. Phoebe was your weird outcast friend, and that's definitely how she was seen then. But these days, people have a lot more affinity for Phoebe. They understand her a lot more and respect her a lot more, in all honesty. But in the 90s, it was very much, ugh, God, Phoebe, why are you like this? But what does Phoebe have with her throughout all of her ups and downs and everything? An incredibly solid group of friends that spend all of their time together. Friends came out in 1994, making it about 30 years old. Do you think that today, if that show was being made, that these people would still be able to be friends in this way because they had heaps of time to be able to spend together? They would all be at the coffee shop all the time. They would be at each other's ginormous apartments. They'd be having a wonderful casual time with each other because they had plenty of time and they lived in very close proximity. Could this show be made today, and what would happen to Phoebe today? Call me a huge cynic, but I absolutely see Phoebe as being left completely behind. Now, reminder, this is meant to be a group of average New Yorkers. These are very white, able-bodied, cis-het New Yorkers, granted, but it's meant to be a group of average, run-of-the-mill, everyday, mid-20s New Yorkers. Whereas 30 years later, people can't afford to move out of home, and if they can, they're incredibly spread apart. They're living in incredibly cramped apartments. I know that the apartments in the original show were not indicative of what apartments were like in New York, but still. So people can't actually have each other over. It's considered to be loitering if you're anywhere for free, and also you would get kicked out of that coffee shop so fast, and you also can't afford to go to third places. Third places are too expensive for people to go to, and you work so much and typically have like at least a side gig, probably 2 jobs actually in all honesty, to be able to just afford to live. So do you really have this close a network of friends around you? No. You may call me cynical, but I've seen this and I've dealt with this, granted without the labels, but I absolutely think that Phoebe would get labelled to be an oversharing trauma dumper and left behind. And once again, this just shows the need for the thing that we're talking about in the next section.
Everybody sucks.
Except us.
You know how I feel about people that aren't us.
Community. Now, have you ever actually been in an environment that really was a true community feeling? Like, have you actually seen your family, your parental figures, everyone actually hanging out together, not just with friends, not just with family, but with the wider, close-knit community? Have you really experienced that growing up? Do you see it today? Have we really ever been in environments which do share personal things with people and look after each other? Like, where's the village then? Where's the village now? And like I said, how many times do we have to lament the loss of third places, which is why workplaces have kind of become third places for people. And this is why people overshare in an office, because that is your third space. These are your like second family in a way at work, because we spend longer at work, we're way more productive at work than we've ever been, and we're also not affording to actually live life and go out to third spaces because they're behind a paywall. So it makes perfect sense why people are potentially oversharing to their fellow colleagues. As established, we're all fighting different battles, we're all dealing with a whole bunch of stuff, and because we don't have really solid social networks, of course we're gonna kind of turn to the people that we spend the most time with, which is our colleagues and our bosses and everything like that. And the thing is, once again, like you kept on bringing up in the comment sections, context is key, as there are people that you get along well with at work and that you've got good working relationships with, and there are others who you do not have any reciprocal relationship with. But once again, this is where boundaries can get a little bit more tricky, and I don't know how to solve that situation if you just have people like coming to you all the time, telling you everything that's going on in their life, and then they never want to listen to you, because that's once again not a relationship. That is one-sided, okay? That is where there's a problem there. Maybe try cutting into the conversation and talking about stuff that's going on at work. I don't know. I don't really know how to solve that situation because I've never really shut people up when they're telling me about their problems. So that's probably a boundary issue on my end, isn't it? And thus, at the end of this very long video, we get onto my final thoughts. Personally, for me, I don't think that the world progresses without people being vulnerable and honest and sharing the things that they're dealing with and actually informing other people and working together. I personally do not think that any progress will happen unless people are quote-unquote oversharing or trauma dumping or whatever else you want to call it. That's probably an unpopular opinion, but I don't think that we'll be talking about the red flags that people are dealing with in relationships. I don't think that we'll be talking about the worker rights issues that people have been facing unless we actually challenge the status quo and actually had these uncomfortable conversations. And I know it's uncomfortable to have a lot of these conversations, but that's kind of where growth comes from, at least in my mind, and also where people can actually change things, at least hopefully for the better. Just to use the romantic relationship thing as an example, look at all of the horrors that have been happening in Australia. Like this, talking about the red flags and actually looking out for each other by warning of the things that are going on in relationships, like I've talked about in this video here. This is something which is about people's safety. These whisper networks, this gossip, this oversharing, this actually helps to save people's lives. This helps to change stuff. And this is why I'm saying I'm still on the side of the oversharer, even though, like I said throughout this whole video, I understand all of the reasons for all of the different attitudes towards it. I really do think that shutting ourselves off and just compartmentalizing stuff doesn't actually allow us to have a full human experience and create the community that is absolutely desperately needed and indeed wanted. But like I've spoken about so many times, capitalism has effectively drained us of all of our energy. We spend so long commuting, way longer working, we're working 2 jobs, you're struggling to get by. When you're trying to meet all of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and stuff, when you're struggling on these bottom sections all the time, how are you meant to do that other stuff? Lefty rant incoming, but because of the way that capitalism has made us feel like we need to be productive all the time, that we need to be buying stuff, producing things, and that emotions are weak and a waste of time and everything because of like this patriarchal capitalism BS, honestly, I really am not surprised that we've kind of gotten to this point, but this is not what's actually going to help us look after each other. This is the stuff which has drained us of the energy to care about each other because we're not even fighting for ourselves. So how are we going to fight for each other? You know, this is the time where we actually need to be talking to each other, where we need to be organizing. And once again, this is my other call for saying, please join a union if you're able to, or get started on building one. It's one of the best things that you can do because we all live in this capitalistic hellscape, but unions are a thing which are a very big net positive. We've created terms like oversharing and trauma dumping to label incredibly human responses, and it's being applied to things which just aren't even that. And this makes it easier for people to feel better about judging others or to cut others off, as we're all in this time-poor state in this bleak world which is making us more separated in each other, leading to no doubt more of these issues and more of these people really wanting this connection and then potentially stumbling over themselves and making faux pas and stuff because they don't really know how to connect with people and they just want that. And it's a completely human, normal thing to want this connection and to want community. And like far wiser people before me have said, the need for community is always absolutely there. Genuinely, we need to recognize that humans being humans is not a bad thing. So when you see people being honest or vulnerable online or in real life, like recognize it for what it is. It's an opportunity to see how someone else thinks, to hear about other people's experiences, and have a bit of empathy and compassion for folk, approaching from a place of understanding and curiosity rather than judgment or derision. Honestly, if we did this more in life, the world would be so much of a better place. If we recognise that the loss of community and celebration of hyper-individualism is a real issue here, we'll hopefully help people understand that this is the root cause, and it's up to us to build that back up. And it can come down to really small steps, like I've brought this up so many times, but volunteering is one of the best things that you can do, not only to ease your climate anxiety, but also to actually make connections with other like-minded people. There are clubs that you can join, there are all sorts of things that people can do, but like I said before, time is a privilege. I am so very well aware of that, and I've talked about that many times as well. And also, if you have health issues, the world is not a very safe place to go out and about in because people aren't masking. So I also get it from that perspective as well, because what energy do you have when work drains all of your energy and then you're like, I only have enough spoons left to perhaps cook and eat dinner. So yeah, multifaceted problems. Basically, we just need to abolish capitalism. Wow, wouldn't that be fun? Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this very long video. I've been filming for over 3 hours now, so I'm positive it's going to be super long, so I'm very sorry about that. But I really wanted to have like an in-depth discussion about this because my brain has been brewing over this, and I found this topic to be incredibly confronting because I've just got more things to talk about with my therapist now. So subscribe if you haven't yet. And also, if you made it all the way to the end, who do you relate to when it actually comes to your attitudes towards oversharing? Once again, none of them are bad. Everyone's just different. Like I always stress, everyone's got different lived experiences. I'm not saying that all Mirandas are bad or Charlottes are bad or everyone should be a Samantha, otherwise you're a terrible person. No, not at all. And I did say I'd have a cute little surprise for you at the end. So here's some videos of the cats when they were kittens. We actually learnt the other day that the cats are 50 years old in cat years because they're 8.5. And this footage was taken at our rental property that we were at in the past, where we had to pay heaps of money just so then we could actually have the kittens there. And oh my goodness, like they're so teeny and cute. Thanks so much for watching and looking forward to continue this conversation in the comments, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!